I'm very happy that you're all here. And first of all, I want to thank the Climate Vulnerable Forum and the V20 for providing this space, in the same space that the Global Shield was launched, to discuss on how civil society can contribute to improve it and how we can also learn from experience that the civil society has done before. I want to start off with a very short presentation about the project that we have been implementing and also a short glimpse of the Global Shield, so we're all on the same page of what we're going to talk about. And then we're going to have several inputs from our civil society actors on what they expect from the Global Shield. We're going to have an input by youth delegates, which I'm very happy to also have here to share their opinion. And then we're going to have two presentations about countries, the Senegal and Philippines, who have been part of our project, have implemented a multi-stakeholder, multi-actor partnership on climate and disaster risk finance and insurance, and who are also going to be pathfinder countries of the Global Shield, so we can learn from them. The session is going to be recorded, and we're going to make an opinion paper out of the statements that have been made here later. So, Jessica, could you change the slide for me, please? Yes, thank you very much. So when you think about climate and disaster risk finance, you might think, wow, this is such an abstract and a big complicated topic, and this only concerns the insurance industry, maybe governance, and that's it. But actually that is not the case. So climate and disaster risk finance should be on all of the society debate, including actors from civil society, academia, the public sector, and the private sector. And why is this? It's because we need to discuss who owns the risk. And then once we have discussed this, what the risk is there and who owns it, who is going to pay for it? So whose responsibility is it to pay for the climate risks? And also who makes the decisions? And it should not only be one actor making decisions, we should all make these decisions together. Thank you. So if we include the civil society in this process of disaster risk finance, there's multiple benefits to it. So the civil society have a broad network, and they can enable and facilitate multi-stakeholder engagement across their constituencies. Also, they can ground truth the concepts that are sometimes a bit abstract and bring in all the local perspectives, because this is what the civil society can do best, connect to the actual climate vulnerable populations that everybody is talking about to protect. And they can contribute to transparency and also accountability in this space. And going further, engaging the civil society organizations can also build consortia and partnerships that are relevant for implementation and also for uptake of the instrument in the end. We can enable international and regional learning, as we have been doing in the multi-actor partnership, by connecting different civil societies across the globe. And then finally, we can also unlock funding potential, for example, from the Insure Resilience Global Partnership, through transferring information and preparing proposals. So this is the stakeholders in the project that are going to present here today. We are the multi-actor partnership on climate and disaster risk finance and insurance, and we, in the last 3 years, have set up 7 multi-actor partnerships, or are in the process of setting up. And 5 of the 7 are present here today. I'm very happy about this. And as you can see, we're all around the globe, and we have in these multi-actor partnerships in the countries, civil society, academia, private sector, and the government. And on the international sphere, we are also involved in the high-level consultative group of the Insure Resilience Global Partnership. So, the Global Shield. There has been lots of talk about it in this COP, obviously, with the launch in this same room here on Monday. And just for everybody to know what we are talking about, I put this concept of the Global Shield from the latest concept note. And basically what the Global Shield is going to do is it has several functions. So it wants to improve the finance by getting more finance, so scaling up the disaster risk finance and insurance. But not only that, so it's also going to be broader and have more actors, for example, also including adaptive social protection. So more money in general. Then you have a global coordinating mechanism, because there are so many initiatives in the last 5 to 10 years in this field, but they have not been so coordinated and maybe not the most efficient. So in this box over there, there's going to be a coordinating hub. trying to work together closer and align all of these programs. Then, over there, the Global Shield is going to have a financing structure, which is going to be comprised of the Global Shield Financing Facility, which is basically a reformed GRIF at the World Bank. Then we have the Global Shield Solutions Platform, which is here on the right, which is going to be a reformed Insure Resilience Solutions Fund. And then in the middle, we have the CVF and V20 Joint Multi-Donor Trust Fund. So this is kind of the financing structure of the Global Shield. Then another part is that the Global Shield is going to have smart capital and premium subsidies to make the products that they're going to launch or develop or co-finance more affordable for the vulnerable countries and populations. All decisions of this Global Shield are going to be taken by the high-level consultative group, which is going to be an expanded Insure Resilience high-level consultative group. But then the question is, what is going to be funded? What are going to be the programs? And this is going to be decided in the in-country dialogue in the middle, which is going to be kind of led by the in-country coordinator. So the details for this in-country dialogue are still to be determined, but there has been an idea by the Insure Resilience Secretariat and partners in the Insure Resilience newsletter, which I have linked here. And this is kind of the latest idea, but it's still to be developed. So the idea is that there is this nationally determined national coordinator who leads the process. And in the process, there's going to be multiple actors that come together and discuss what are the needs and the gaps, but also what is already out there, so you don't duplicate anything. And then you make a needs analysis, like a risk assessment, also building on everything that's already out there, so you don't duplicate anything. Then once you know where are my gaps and what do I already have, the country is going to determine several priorities that they are going to submit to a technical expert working group for review. And then in a joint process, several priorities are going to be identified, which are then going to be funded by this financial mechanism. So this is more or less the idea. As you heard, it said multi-actor commitment in the beginning. So this is exactly what our multi-actor partnership has already been doing and why we think that our project can contribute to this process. And now I want to invite my first panelists to the panel to explain us what the civil society expects from the Global Shield based on their country experiences. So I am happy to welcome Dennis Momba from Slyken Trust Sri Lanka. Then joined us from CARE Bangladesh, Jeremiah Venitra from South FJKM Madagascar, and Julius Ngoma from the CSO-led Malawi. Thank you very much. So I want to ask all of you basically the same question from your organizations and your experiences. What do you expect from the Global Shield? I'm going to start with you, Dennis, because Slyken Trust is co-chairing. It is in the Insure Resilience high-level consultative group representing the CSOs. So I'm going to give the mic to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Magdalena, and welcome everybody. Hello. So as Magdalena said, my name is Dennis. I work for Slyken Trust as Director of Research and Knowledge Management. And Slyken Trust is a non-profit think tank. We are based in Sri Lanka with our main office, but we work across Africa and Asia and also connect to the UNFCCC process. So we work on the national, the local and the global level and try to make this connection also between the levels. And what do we expect from the Global Shield? It's a good question. I don't want to go into the technicalities of the structure of the Global Shield or the financing arrangements, but I would like to say it's, from our perspective, very important that the Global Shield and the processes surrounding it are multi-stakeholder driven, that they're inclusive, that they are participatory, and that they're transparent. And that's something we have been highlighting and advocating for throughout our engagement with Insure Resilience Global Partnership. So we are in the gender working group, we are in the impact working group, and our executive director is a member of the high-level consultative group. And we have been strongly advocating to include voices from civil society in the process, to include voices from communities in the process, and also voices of youth. And I think our youth delegates later can talk a bit more about that. So in Sri Lanka, where we have been working on setting up the multi-actor partnership, We have set a partnership up that is comprising government entities, but also civil society actors, the private sector, representatives of communities in certain areas that we have focused on, and also academia, research entities, media, so a very broad coalition of stakeholders. And we think it's important when the Global Shield sets up like a national coordination structure, that this does not duplicate existing structures, but rather connects and enhances what's already there. And that in this in the decision-making processes around the Global Shield, that there are elements related to capacity building, to awareness creation, and to ensuring that there are members of civil society at the table, that there are members from communities, or at least civil society organizations representing communities at the table, and that it's not just government and private sector, but all these stakeholders are there, because they are the ones actually impacted by climate change the most, and also the ones who would be the ultimate beneficiaries of the Global Shield and the instruments and mechanisms under it. So that's one aspect, and the other aspect is that we want it to be driven by evidence. So what we do a lot is to collect evidence from the ground. We get, of course, the physical evidence, like the met data, the demographic data, the existing data collecting mechanisms, but also the human data, let's say, by talking with communities, talking with farmers, talking with supply chain actors like the rice millers, the people transporting, the local bankers, and the entire ecosystem. Local authorities are there, the extension officers are there, and then, of course, on the national level, the policymakers. And to include evidence and voices from all these, to get a holistic picture of what is actually the need on the ground and what are the mechanisms to deliver support for those affected. So this is very important, that this is based on evidence and it's specific to the local context. And whatever the Global Shield does, it should connect to this. It should connect to existing local structures and try to build on those. And it should, from our point of view, should make sure that the actual needs are addressed and are centered at any processes. So that support can be given targeted to those who most need it, and that includes, of course, specifically vulnerable groups. It includes youth, it includes women, it includes those with special needs and disabilities, it includes the elderly, it includes informal workers, it includes migrants and displaced people. So a lot of intersectional considerations that need to be taken into account to make sure that it's targeting everyone who is in need of support, that it's actually a global shield, but also a local shield and a national shield that doesn't just shield specific groups, but shields like a whole community ecosystem and a whole society and economy. So yeah, from our point of view, these would be important considerations, and we will work, continue working on making sure that these are included in the in the discussions and the processes around the Global Shield and the Introduce Global Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis. I'm going to hand the mic over to Joy from CARE Bangladesh, where he is a senior program coordinator. And Bangladesh, CARE has been involved in the MAPS project since the beginning in several country offices. Bangladesh is meant to join the next phase starting very soon. Bangladesh, I think, is also a pathfinder country of the Global Shield, or has at some point been considered. So I'm wondering, Joy, what do you expect from the Global Shield?
Thank you, Magdalena. So I'll building on what just Dennis told. So firstly, of course, we really, really appreciate this, the pledges made by the rich countries to the Global Shield. Having said that, I mean, the other thing we appreciate that the high-level consultative group is really inclusive, because we see that there will be people from G7, G20, think tank, as well as civil society. So that's also appreciated. So as much as we applaud this, we kind of reiterate that this is, the Global Shield is part of the solution, not the solution. And this cannot anyway substitute the need of a separate loss and damage financing facility. And we really urge the global rich countries that they keep their commitment to it and establish this loss and damage facility as early as possible. And of course, if you look at the fund, it is almost clear that the fund which have been pledged is not enough and insignificant. This is probably one of the reasons that the first recipient group of countries are only 7, whereas there are as many as 58 countries in the V20 groups. So that's one thing. And from CARE, so we have a few expectations and some recommendations. One is that if the fund which is being committed here has to be new and additional, and it cannot replace the, or taken out from the adaptation fund, because the adaptation facility, adaptation fund is already overstressed, and the vulnerable countries are already sort of in a very precarious situation condition, and they cannot really cover the cost. For example, our environment minister yesterday told that the adaptation funding from Bangladesh's own pocket has been raised to 3.1 billion from 1.4 billion in the last 8 years. It's almost 2.5 times higher. So if you replace this fund with adaptation fund or kind of camouflage this, that cannot be, this will be not a solution at all. And of course, if it is labeled as climate funds, we really want that this goes through the CVF V20 fund component of the Global Shield, because that is kind of the best way to provide grant-based finance to the affected communities. So that's one thing. The other thing is that we really want this facility to be prioritized, or so to leverage, to strengthen the social safety net program in developing countries, because if you have a strong, accountable social safety net program, that kind of help countries to support communities affected from climatic disasters. And of course, if the funds are channeled or it approached as insurance mechanism, it has to be pro-pure and gender sensitive. As you know that the kind of sentiment there are in developing countries in climate regarding climate insurance, so it has to be taken into account. It has to be really sensitive. So yeah, and of course, civil society is ready. We are ready. We are ready to support the process, as well as to deliver the payment to the affected communities. And as the McDonald started, yes, we need consultation at the national level as well as a subnational level, because there are differences in countries in terms of vulnerability, in terms of capacity from region to region. So it's very important that you take into account the subnational actors' views into considerations, and that is why in the next phase of MAP project, we are in Bangladesh, we are following a mechanism where both national and subnational actors' considerations and aspects will be taken into account. So that is going to be very important, and we hope that the Global Shield takes all this into account and take us into the journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joy, for these words. I'm going to move on now to Julius Ngoma, where he is coordinator at the Civil Society Network on Climate Change in Malawi. Malawi has been heavily affected by droughts, has also been involved with the African risk capacity for a long time, and has quite some experience with climate and disaster risk finance insurance. Julius, what are your thoughts on the Global Shield, and what do you expect from it?
Thank you, Magdalene, and good morning, colleagues. My name is Julius Ngoma from Malawi, as she said. I'm working with the Civil Society Network on Climate Change, but we've also been very privileged to be part of the consortium that we've been working on climate and disaster risk financing and insurance for the last 3 years. And beyond that, we've also been engaging on climate finance related issues. So I want to take it from the African perspective in terms of how we also maybe learning the lessons from the engagements that we've been having with the African risk capacity and some other institutions. So I think it's a welcome idea that we are having this Global Shield, and I hope one thing that we hope is that it's not going to take out, as my colleague has indicated, it's not going to be an issue where we need to start forgetting about the loss and damage financing facility issue. So if we want to take it that way, then I think it would be a bit problematic, because What we expect is that we will have that financing facility, and we would also be working with mechanisms like the Global Shield that would actually be helping us as vulnerable countries. We need more and more of such initiatives because there are so many risks that we need to manage. There's so many areas that needs to be touched, and learning from the African risk capacity, we've seen so many countries being supported, but still there are so many gaps. Why I'm saying the gaps? Because, for example, the African risk capacity doesn't really allow countries to go, to identify a broad range of risks so that they can be supported. So I hope the Global Shield will actually put in place a mechanism that will help us to ensure that if countries are to participate or be supported, it will not only be one type of risk, but it will be a comprehensive number of risks that countries can actually be able to identify and be supported from the Global Shield. One thing that has also been missing in the existing mechanisms that we feel maybe the Global Shield can also take into consideration is the issue of having a very clear stakeholder engagement strategy. We know here, I think the announcement has been there at a higher level. We expect governments to take their roles, play their roles, but sometimes civil society are actually forgotten. We also even forget other stakeholders that would actually play a role in such kind of implementing or being part of the mechanism. For example, we want, as we are talking about the Global Shield, we need to also be talking about who is going to be the beneficiary of such mechanisms. The local community themselves. We already have, for example, existing community-based early warning systems. We have processes at national level, at community level that will help us to identify those local risks. I'm not sure how, for example, the structure that you are presenting here is going to be able to take into consideration those mechanisms where the local communities, other stakeholders, civil society would be able to feed into the process and be able to make the Global Shield work for the better of the poor and the most vulnerable. And then my other point was, let it not be very extractive as an initiative. We've seen some of these initiatives, going down and then, begging for the poor to pay for themselves for risks, for managing risks. I hope in the mechanisms we are looking at, it's going to be a mechanism that will allow the G7 countries to be able to support the most vulnerable in terms of, for example, if there's going to be a need for payment of premiums and so on and so forth. These communities should not be extracted, but they should be supported in terms of the different ways they can be able to engage, even if there is need for any financial incentive that needs to become a part of it. So I think that's what I wanted to say for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Julius. Now we've already heard quite a number of concerns. So we have different stakeholders, different levels, different risks, and actually being pro-poor and many more. Now we're going to move on to our last panelist from this session. Well, this one panel. We have many to come. Jeremiah Fenitra, who is a funding and communications manager at CVF JKM in Madagascar. Madagascar also very heavily affected by different climate risks and has seen a rise in pilots of CDRFI in the last couple of years. So there's already some experience. Fenitra, what do you expect from the Global Shield?
Thank you, Magdalena. Please allow me to stand up because of the presentation. Okay. CVF JKM is a non-governmental organization operational in Madagascar since 1974 and working through the 22 regions of Madagascar within its 55 units. and we are actually focused on local communities and grassroots, and with the mission to work for human dignity through 5 programs: environment and climate change, disaster risk management, food security, health, and water, hygiene, and assainissement. Next, please. Next. Yeah, about our expectations on the Global Shield, we expect that it will be more simple and transparent, but also secured. Why? Because if the procedures and processes to access to the Global Shields are as complex as, for example, the Green Climate Fund or the Adaptation Fund, it will be the ownership of this mechanism for the vulnerable communities and local actors will be very low. So the effectivity at the grassroots level will not be effective. And we expect also that the Global Shield will be effective and efficient with clear impact at the grassroots level, because in Madagascar, we are one of the 10 most vulnerable countries in terms of climate change. In the south, we have regular and more intense drought everywhere. So the people affected by the drought are losing their livelihood or sometimes forced to leave their lands, their houses. And we would want for the Global Shield to have impact on these people, direct impact on these people. And also, as we work for woman dignity, we would like the Global Shield to be a human mechanism, because as we know, here we are at the COP27 at a high level space. So we would like for this to see the human at the grassroots level, those who are really affected by climate change. For example, the vulnerable groups, the women and girls, those with disability, so they can really benefit from this mechanism. So we have some recommendations. We took the opportunity to give some recommendation for the Global Shift to have better impacts at the local level. For example, we need the commitment of local actors, civil societies, and private sectors at local level. We can also do some information and consultation, and do some capacity building of the local actors so they can better run this mechanism. And also, we have to ensure that the money will reach the most vulnerable. It can include to set up a solid accountability and monitoring mechanism, so to ensure the transparency of the mechanism. And also, we can add some accompanying measures, to add up to what my colleague from Bangladesh said. It will not be the only one mechanism to protect these people from climate and disaster risk. We can also use some complementary CDRFI mechanism with the proper approach to ensure that all the needs are covered. For example, if we take the insurance mechanism, there is a threshold where the money can be paid to trigger the payment of the payout. And for us, after the consultation of the actors and the local communities, they don't understand why, if they are affected by the cyclone, by the drought, if there is no rain, why there are no compensation for them because they didn't reach the threshold. So we need some complementary and accompanying measures to ensure that there's a risk and there's loss and damages can be covered. So that's all for me for now.
Thank you so much. I think this was very helpful, very concrete, and also with the suggestions. I've seen several people taking pictures, so I guess these points are going to be well noted. Now I'm going to want to move on and invite our youth delegates to the stage, if they're here, to deliver a few comments on what youth expects from the Global Shield. In case you're ready, please come here. Because youth is the future, but also, unfortunately, we're going to be, for all our lives, affected by climate change. So if you could come here to join me on the stage, introduce yourself, and share your perspective on the Global Shield. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, I'm Ashan Karwananda, representing Slack and Trust Youth, which is the youth node of Slack and Trust. So I'm from Sri Lanka, a beautiful island, isolated island in the Indian Ocean. So if you take over the past few decades, Sri Lanka has been impacted by climate change a lot. If you take, there has an increase in landslides, floods, droughts, and change in rainfall patterns. So this has impacted the people, especially the youth in these areas. So so with our research and ground level work, we have been conducting research and have worked with local communities, especially in the rural areas. So here we have got inputs from youth, which they say that they have been impacted from climate change, but actually they don't know sometimes what is the actual term of climate change, what it stands for, and also the reasons for this. So we have identified this gap while we are working with the youth. So we have been conducting awareness creation programs, capacity building programs in the local, national, and also the international level to bridge this gap. So if you take one of our initiatives, the Global Youth Forum on Climate Change, which has been done from the year 2016 itself. So this is a platform where we engage youth, and now it has been moved to a more global level since 2020, where we bring youth from across the globe to come to one platform so that they could
Test. Maybe it works again?
So coming back to the topic, the Global Youth Forum on Climate Change. Coming back. Coming back to the Global Youth Forum on Climate Change. So we have identified this gap, and in 2020 to 23, we are having a specific theme on climate and disaster risk management. So which would further help youth to get the knowledge. And also I have to add that the Global Youth Forum, like, what was the main aim, because we could bring youth across the whole globe to one platform so they could share their experiences and also good practices, which will be helpful for countries such as Sri Lanka. And also I would add that Global Shield, like, if you could come like help in these initiatives such as the Global Youth Forum, it will help more on taking this to the youth on more knowledge on CDRFI solutions, and it will help in getting more innovative and also help in enhancing climate actions in the ground level. That's what I had. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Sajani Ranasinghe. I work as a legal and policy analyst for Slyke and Trust. Also, I'm a part of the Slyke and Trust youth team as well, as my two colleagues who are on the stage here. So as Ashan mentioned, yes, Sri Lanka is quite affected by the climate-induced disasters. And it does affect our food systems and especially our agriculture sector as well. And climate change impact the lives and well-being of many communities as well. So youth are one of those groups that are impacted by climate change, and they face a number of challenges due to these disasters. Their education is disrupted, their livelihoods are disrupted, as well as their basic access or access to their basic needs such as sanitation and shelter is also disrupted during these disaster times. So what we do expect from the Global Shield or initiatives like Global Shield is to provide the necessary financial assistance to youth, or that ensure that financial assistance reaches to youth as well as other vulnerable groups to ensure that they can recover faster after these disasters. They're impacted by these disasters, and to ensure that their lives are not disrupted and that they can sort of lead their lives just like other youths and other groups across the world who might not be necessarily affected as such from disasters. As Ashan mentioned, we do have the Global Youth Forum where we do engage with youth to sort of give them knowledge regarding a number of thematic areas, including CDRFI. But we also have a youth partnership on climate and disaster risk management, where we do engage with youth to disseminate knowledge regarding climate disaster risk management, as well as to build their resilience and to ensure that there's meaningful engagement on their part. So that's what I do expect from the Global Shield, and maybe interact more with youth from different communities and to give them that necessary knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now I've heard engage and also cooperate with the youth initiatives that already exist and provide financing that in the end serves the vulnerable and the youth. Thank you. Do you want to add something on what your colleagues have said?
I think most of the points were covered by my two colleagues from Slyke and Trust Youth. So in order to, just put some additional comments on what he had. I think in order to achieve these Global Shield targets, it's good to have this inclusive process and also very participatory and a transparent, accountable system across the program. And youth will be definitely, they are vulnerable, and then they'll be definitely get sort of get the support to ensure the support in this ecosystem would be very much grateful. There were, my colleagues mentioned about the initiatives that Slyke has taken throughout the past few years. One of them was the Global Youth Forum on Climate Change, where we do speak about the risk management aspect in terms of entrepreneurship angles as well. So one of the initiatives is Ethical X program, where we support to build their capacities and technical needs of the entrepreneurs, smallholder and medium enterprises, entrepreneurships, how to address the risk management aspect of it. That's also a platform where we engage a lot with the youth. Global Youth Forum, of course, we have the components, as well as risk management and youth partnership. We have a separate partnership with youth who are interested and also who are willing to learn about, build their capacities on risk management and overall aspects. So Global Shield would be a really good platform where youth can access and get support from them. Not necessarily the finance aspect, but also the technical and capacity building aspect as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution and for coming. I am wondering, now that we already had so many panelists, if somebody has a question from the audience. that we could answer. We have like 5 minutes before we move on. I see a hand. I'm going to come. You could introduce yourself and ask a question.
Okay, my name is Ebere and I'm from Nigeria. I work with the civil society, so that's why the topic was quite interesting for me. You talked about improving disaster risk finance. Okay, that means what I understand is that you're trying to increase access to finance for vulnerable communities and using the platform of CSOs. But what I'm curious about is who gets the finance to be able to assist the communities? Is it the CSOs or is it still going to be a platform of going back through government? That's number one. Then number two, in instance, I know Bangladesh has some similar disaster issues with Nigeria. That's where I come from. And the last, I think about 2-3 weeks ago, we had serious flooding incidents. And one of the key challenges was trying to provide relief materials to those who had encountered the flooding. And it was really not easy to be able to find CSOs to be able to help with the distribution of the relief material. So how can one work towards, how can one be able to get over that kind of challenge? Thank you. Him and him. Yes.
Okay. First, we're going to start by asking Joy. You were selected to answer the question.
I didn't get it. Can you please repeat the question?
So the question, the second part of the question was, I think, to Joy, how the CSOs can help to distribute the goods, because in Nigeria there was a similar experience that there was a lot of goods, and then in the end there was a distribution problem, and there was a problem to find CSOs that could actually help on the ground.
So let me, thank you. So I mean CSOs can, of course, depending on the structure of particular country. But especially in South Asia, the disaster management structure is quite strong, you know. So even in Sri Lanka, I can say. So there is government-led initiative where there are disaster management committees at the grassroots level. So what the CSOs usually do, they engage with the disaster management committees, and of course, firstly with the affected communities. So the selection process is fair, and even there we can do it in a couple of days, and even in one day using Kobo, like, you know, there are certain criteria, and they will give you the results, who are the most eligible families or affected people who should be getting the support. So that's transparent, and it is also those selections are also vetted. But that's emergency type. But when you talk about selection for the social safety network, so that can be even more transparent because it can take some time. You don't have to do it on an urgent basis. You can do a proper selection, go through a proper selection process and vet it through the local administration as well as by the communities. So if you do that, so that there is no controversy, and we have been part of all kind of distribution process, not the social safety net program per se in Bangladesh, but there are talks like that whether civil society can play more vibrant role, because we are part of the selection process, not the delivery process. But there are talks around that, whether that can be considered or not, because you know, there are like more than 120 kind of social safety net program in Bangladesh, even for widows, elderly people, people who are differently able, all this kind of people. So if there are lot of space where we can actually engage and support the government, and it seems that the Global Shield is going to support government on those front as well. So this is where we think that civil society comes into play. Thank you.
To also answer the first part of your question, if the multi-actor partnership distributes the funds itself. So our multi-actor partnership does not do that. So we build a communication platform, we do capacity building. I know that in the space, for example, the START network, in the more humanitarian anticipatory action area, they distribute funds themselves, but we don't. So our aim is to improve insurance or other financing options to better serve the poor and vulnerable. But we would not set up a program by ourselves. It would also be too big of a scope to like make an insurance ourselves. Is there another question in the room? Yes.
Mine is more of a comment. I'm Erima Gloria Oria. I'm also from Nigeria, and my NGO is Earth and Sustainability Initiatives. Actually, we do relate to issues of disaster finance and looking at the vulnerable communities. But my natural response is also that we sometimes will place much emphasis on finance for disaster without also looking at assessment of the risk itself. Because except you have an accurate or very close assessment of the degree, the quantum of risk you have, you really cannot finance it, or even be able to say whether it's something that is doable. So I think our starting point would be to be able to, or have a mechanism by which we should be able to assess the degree of any risk at any particular time. Because it did happen in Nigeria that when 33 states got flooded, 33 out of 36 states got flooded, the very first issue that the government had was to be able to assess it, because initially they thought they were maybe like 10 states and they brought a relief which didn't go anywhere, and then some other people say, oh, we're also involved, and then several truckloads of relief got to them, and then they realized that, oh, this is very massive, this is not something that one could handle, and then they started looking for help, crying for help, and it took weeks, and people were already dying and suffering. So I think that if we have a mechanism by which we could have an immediate assessment of the risk, it will help in managing it. Whatever fund we have, you then be able to spread that fund to see that it goes a long way into meeting all the people or all the sectors that are involved. Also, I was looking at issues of insurance, because although climate insurance is a very topical area, and it is still on the front burner in terms of how to handle it, how to calculate the quantum of risk and what premium to be paid. But I think it's also high time that we begin to discuss about insurance, climate insurance, because ultimately the donors will get to a point where they will be tired. It will get to a point where the funds may not be available. But if we have a pool which the insurance companies are managing, it is still something that will go a very long way. It is something that will be sustainable, because my NGO talks about sustainable living, sustainable initiative. It's not just a one-off. And again, we need to build data. Bankable data bankable and segregated data that will be reliable at every time. Because when this happened in Nigeria, we couldn't tell in this locality how many people are living there, or how many people lived there before the flood came. So you cannot say, okay, that now you have 1,000 people that have drowned or that are displaced, climate displaced people. But if we have a segregated data, even in assisting the people, even when you raise the finance, you could say, okay, oh, we have 20,000 school children here, therefore we can provide adequately for them, and then we have girls in this place, we can also provide adequately for them. So it's time for us to begin to look more holistically at solving the problem of disaster risk management using finance. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think you have raised a very valid point that we need data and we need risk models, and they need to be accessible. I can make a bit of advertisement here in this same booth. The V20, who are kindly hosting us, are also hosting an event from the Global Risk Modeling Alliance this afternoon, I think at 4 p.m., which is exactly tackling this issue, that there's many countries not risk models and no risk data available, and it should more be accessible. I think you should join the session. I think you're going to love it, but a very valid point. Thank you so much. I am going to move on in our session to the next panel. The next panel is going to be Emmanuel Sek from Ender Energy, and a colleague, Kairos de la Cruz from the Philippines, ICSC, is going to join us online, or he sent us a video, because, you know, internet. So, Emmanuel, can you please join me on the stage? Emmanuel is from Senegal in his organization, and we have the maps in the Senegal. The Senegal is also a pathfinder country. So I think here the pathfinder countries are the first countries where the Global Shield is going to be implemented. So here we still have time to test, to find the best ways, to see how the in-country dialogues work. And I think here it's especially important to learn from the concrete experience of our project your project trying to bring different stakeholders together to communicate and to talk about the needs and the gaps, because this is exactly what the in-country dialogue is also going to do. So I'm going to pass the mic on to you to share some of your experiences in the process of our project.
Thank you very much, Magdalena. Hello, everyone. Allow me first to welcome the initiative of the Global Shield that bring together G7 countries with the vulnerable countries, the 21. And to say that with the Global Shield, what I expect really is that the Global Shield be less procedural. Go to the fact and make impact. I explain myself. We have seen many plan elaborate, for example, the NAPAs for the least developing countries, but at the end, when they end to elaborate this plan, we did not find any resources to implement that. So we would like to see that the Global Shield go in two ways. The first one, as the lady from Nigeria said, there is a need to meet the challenge of knowledge, I mean in terms of assessment. We have to assess quantitatively and qualitatively. When I say qualitatively, is related to the non-economic losses within the communities. And the second, to find a way to link up with the policies that are set up at the country level. And if there are financial mechanisms for agency matters or for survival, that at least the Global Shield help. Someone say that it is not the solution. Definitely, what we expect is to have facilities for loss and damage, and we reiterate, we have to reiterate that. Coming to Senegal, indeed, we had opportunities with the programs on CDRFI, I mean climate and disaster risk finance and insurance, to establish a multi-stakeholders framework. We did not call it platform because there is a lot of platform at the country level. So we avoid using the acronyms of platform, bringing together different stakeholders, including the government, because the co-chairing is ensured by the Department of Environment and also the Department of Civil Protection, which is the focal point of the Sendai framework. And the Department of Environment is leading the UNFCCC process. So we bring together those who are working on the Sendai framework and those who are working on climate change to look at closely the issues of disaster risk, but also climate risk. So we enhance the understanding of the slow onset events and the loss and damage issues that are linked to this slow onset event, because we have to be clear also to avoid, how can I say it, misunderstanding when we are talking about loss and damage. All loss and damage are not related to climate change. So if we are in the UNFCCC process, we have to be clear on slow onset event and extreme disaster that are linked to climate change. So this is what we did, enhancing the information and the knowledge, because we've produced some publication on slow onset event, on the institutions that are considering this process at the country level, and also at the international level, and the finance that are related to loss and damage. So we have some key areas of interest for the main stakeholders. Climate finance is one of them. Index insurance, because there was a weak knowledge or involvement of civil society in the issue related to insurance. The insurance we know is the insurance related to car, but we know that with the droughts that are affecting our countries, the farmers are more willing to have this insurance, and it is good for them to understand the benefit of the insurance. So we contribute enhancing this information on that. The issue of loss and damage, we come with these findings that I have said with our publication that help us at least to have a narrative to initiate the policy dialogue on these issues, but also to advocate for the loss and damage to be considered as a priority in our countries. Because if you don't consider the loss and damage in your countries, include it in the NDCs, for example, and or having strategies related to loss and damage, it will be difficult for you to advocate for loss and damage to be considered at the international level. So I think we need to have this coherence, and the framework we have, I mean the platform, allows us at least to align, to ensure the alignment and the coherence with the policies, but also what the different stakeholders are doing in the field, because there are sometimes competitions among the different stakeholders, but we at least make the bridge between those who are working on the Sendai framework with those who are working on the UNFCCC, because we think that the main problem that we have is to enhance the resilience of the communities and to help them to cope with disaster when it's happened. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's already a lot of actors working on disaster risk reduction and through the Sendai framework, also on disaster risk finance in Senegal. And I think the Global Shield should make sure to build on these processes already and not add another forum or another partnership on top of this to make the space even more complicated, and also to make sure to include the loss and damages, also the slow onset and the non-economic loss and damages into the equation. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experiences from Senegal. Now we are going to try to make the video from our colleague from the Philippines work. Bear with me for 20 seconds while we make it work. Because the Philippines is also a pathfinder country of the Global Shield. And here, as my colleague Kairos de la Cruz, who is executive director from the Institute for Climate and Resilient Cities in the Philippines, are going to tell us. They are already quite established and have a lot to share. So,
as introduced by my colleague a few minutes ago,
I'm very happy that Kairos managed to join us online, well, through his video, but he was with us only a few hours ago because I received the video shortly before the session, so he is with us in his heart. Now, the panels are officially over. We still have a little bit more than 50 minutes, which we can use for comments and for more questions, if there are any on the floor. Do we have any questions? Antje, please present yourself.
Thank you, Magdalena. My name is Antje Kestner. I'm working for the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development and have been closely involved in developing the Global Shield. So first of all, thank you all for your interest in coming here and asking all those interesting and very important questions. And I would like to just quickly react to some of the speakers and some of your questions. So number one, the Global Shield by no means is trying to preempt discussions on loss and damage, but it's offering a solution to losses and damages already occurring, and it's offering a very immediate solution. It's supposed to start right away and address losses and damages, not slow on-site events yet, but for a certain type of risk, it is offering a very immediate solution. Number two, financing. Financing is never enough. Obviously, we are facing a big challenge. Just to stress that the German contribution to the Global Shield, the core funding of 84 million, is something concerning our funds for this year, for 2022. What we have to do is to get to prove progress on the Global Shield, which will help us mobilize much more funds by other donors. And just stressing that the Global Shield is not supposed to be a donor-driven initiative, but it's supposed to be very much owned by the countries, first of all by the Pathfinder countries, but generally by vulnerable countries interested in collaborating. And more information in detail can be found on the V20 website and on the BMZ website. There are concept notes which go very much into detail on the technical aspects. And thirdly, maybe a quick note on how we envision the Global Shield to work. And climate risk analysis is a very important building block in this endeavor. So the idea is first to have a comprehensive climate risk analysis in a country, then a stock take, what solutions are already working on the ground, and from there going into an in-country dialogue, including civil society actors, including youth, what solutions would be needed on top of that, or how to improve existing solutions. And this is the bit which the financing structure of the Global Shield is then able to fund in a relatively easy and accessible manner. And I believe civil society can be funded, maybe not directly, but through other mechanisms. And it's in CDRFI, you're all aware, it's about building partnerships. CSO is having the local knowledge, but the technical aspects are often with the private sector. So it's about building collaborations with the private sector, but also with humanitarian actors, and find solutions. And maybe finishing with a note, at 1 p.m. there will be a side event in the Pakistan Pavilion where UNICEF is launching their Today and Tomorrow initiative and presenting the first climate risk insurance for children, which is also one of the first implementing steps under the Global Shield, which is taking a bit of a more regional view. So you're really invited to also come over and have a look. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Antje, for clarifying. So we already have 2 more insurance events today in the Pakistan Pavilion at 1, the UNICEF launch, and then we have here the GRMA event, so we stay strong. Dennis has another comment or question.
Actually a question this time. Just to follow up on this, and I know maybe it's early days and it's hard to tell, but I'm just wondering, going forward after the Pathfinder countries, the next countries, do you already have an idea how these are going to be selected and how you're going to build on the experiences from the Pathfinder countries? Like you're going to document those and maybe have an exchange between countries also to see what can be learned from the Pathfinders and then maybe apply to further countries that the Global Shield is going to expand to?
Thank you, Dennis. Absolutely. You're aware that the first round of Pathfinder countries, the V20, have been selecting, and the V20 are closely collaborating in this effort and driving this effort. we've just already been speaking about expanding it to the Pacific, and I think there's a lot of scope of further expanding. It all depends on how much additional funding can be mobilized. Well, and I'm quite optimistic that if we get this off the ground quickly, and if countries take ownership and report about their experiences with the Global Shield, then this will be a success that can be scaled up.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other question or comments? Joy.
Again a question. I mean, you said that civil society can be funded, but not directly through other mechanism. So is it possible to little clarify that? I mean, what is that other mechanism? Because we really see our stake into this, because there are a lot of, if not controversies, a lot of complaints about selection process and accountability process in the developing countries. So if the civil society can get into the main architecture of delivering the Global Shield related funding mechanism or whatever is given to the affected community, so that can considerably alleviate some of those questions, or controversies, and these things can be more accountable actually. So what do you see? I'm sure that maybe we are not at that stage, but if you can reflect something on that.
I see mainly two roles at the start for civil society. One is to provide input and knowledge into designing of solutions, and the other, as has been mentioned in the presentations as well, is to provide training and capacity building on the ground. And as part of this in-country dialogue, I think civil society will play an important role. And from there, we have to see how partnerships are developing, right? So, for example, there are mechanisms where civil society actors could apply together with an insurance and possibly a government actor or an intermediate like a city to develop an insurance product. Things like that I could imagine, right? So I think it's quite complex and it's super context specific. But there are innovative solutions, and the multi-action partnership is a point in case. But often we do have a regional approach there as well. If it's on a more general level, right? If it goes into the in-country processes, I think it will be quite country-specific, and there will need to be some mechanism of how civil society actors are integrated in this process and taken into account.
Do we have anybody else having a question or comment? I don't see anyone. Then I'm very happy again. Thank you so much for the CVF and the V20 for hosting this event. Thank you for my wonderful speakers here in the first row, and to Antje for providing some clarifying comments. Maybe I see you in the other two insurance events that are happening today, and I thank you so much for coming, and have a nice day.